It has been a while, Teresa.
That's right. Hey, Clark.
And a lot has happened over the last while since we've been chatting together. And I think it's probably a good idea to get a little bit caught up on that.
True. I was just thinking earlier on whether you were back in Canada already when we last spoke, but I think you were.
Yes, I was recording in a 13-year-old boy's bedroom.
That's true, yes. It's my favorite recording so far, by the way.
So I've been in now, I went through 3 Airbnbs since coming back from Japan. And of course, I had to modify each of those Airbnbs for various, for recording or conference calls. And actually, I didn't do any podcasting from the second Airbnb, which was a cottage out in Huntsville, Ontario. It's about 2 hours north of Toronto, actually a little over 2 hours north of Toronto. So I never actually did any podcasting from there. Oh, no, that's not true. Ed and I recorded an episode with outside. It was the first outdoor recording. And that's going to be available probably as bonus content because that one got a little bit racy.
Cannot wait.
Yeah. All right, what do we got on tap today? What have you got there? You put some things together, and I think we have 3 kind of areas we were going to talk about. What's the first thing you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, listen, I thought we'd catch up on where we have been. So you've been moving around, but I hear you're also back in your old house, in your actual home. I did want to talk about the 2.0 or complaint challenge that we had spoken about earlier this summer. Then I've been dating. And then I think we should speak about friends. How many do you need? Does long distance friendship work out? I think I'm interested to talk about these topics.
All right. Yeah, could be tough to fit that in, but we'll just go with it and see where if we run out of time, we'll pick up another topic on a different episode, but those sound good. So where are you right now?
I am in Italy. Last time we spoke, I was with my grandparents, Oma and Opa. After a little bit over 3 months, it was really nice, but it got a little bit too much. So, and also my grandmother said, you got to get out. You cannot stay in this village forever. And I could feel myself increasingly becoming, I guess unhappy is not the right word, but just, feeling an itch and just that wasn't ready, that wasn't for me. And so I made the decision to go to a place where I could take a train. I wasn't ready to fly yet. Took the train down to Italy, mostly because from my little German village to Bologna, which was my first stop, I was able to get there within 2 train interchanges. Long train ride. I'm sure it was a risk.
How long?
12 hours. Surely that was a corona risk because you're exposing yourself for so long, but no, it was good. So I've been in Bologna, I've been in Venice, and then for the past month I've been in Florence, and I'm just wrapping up here. I'm leaving on Tuesday. I'm headed back to Oma and Opa. And looks like I'm taking on a new job. I've quit my old role, so big news. Quit the old role.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Got an offer on the table. Needs to be signed. So more on that when the time is ripe to talk about that. But I'll be in Germany.
Yeah, that's great. And you're going to be in, where again is Hanover, Germany?
Yes, I'm going to be in Hanover. Yes.
Yeah. And I think you said you had never been to Hanover before.
I had not been until I recently flew over for a job interview. So, but it was good. It's got a reputation as Germany's most boring city. But people who live there,
I thought that was Frankfurt.
I think that's just a different level. I don't think Frankfurt is boring, but it's just also not great. I think Hanover is really quaint and it's quite beautiful. I didn't think so. So I'm excited. I'll report on how that's going when all is done and dusted.
Yeah, I think that could make for an interesting topic, the starting the new job topic, and we can maybe go through some of the just how companies are onboarding people these days you've been at a couple different companies in the last few years, and maybe comparing a little bit to how you got onboarded in your last job, which was kind of more of a startup company and maybe not as like the big corporations who have these sort of sophisticated and sometimes not sophisticated onboarding processes. It'd be interesting to hear how that goes. Mm-hmm. Especially too in the COVID era. I mean, starting a new job amid COVID, that's something I've been thinking about as I myself am contemplating looking for a new job. Is what's it going to be like interviewing during COVID? Maybe not so much strangeness there, but just coming into a new company and meeting your colleagues, and it's all going to be like, maybe things will be a little more progressed, or are more progressed, that maybe you'll have some face-to-face contact with people. But
yeah, well, luckily, yeah. So these people have started coming back to the office. I think I'm feeling comfortable because it's also in a region of Germany where I feel, where I originally come from, and I've met these people before. However, there's one person on that specific team who joined 1 week before the lockdown in Germany, and she moved to Hanover from as far away as it gets on this globe. Didn't know anybody, went there for a week, immediately they went into lockdown. So that's sort of the worst case.
Right.
Yeah. What about you? So you're back at your old house, huh?
Yep. So this is the house we moved out of three years ago, just over 3 years ago. The house we had lived in since 2008. And when we moved to Japan, we turned it over to a tenant who lived here for those 3 years. And I'm happy to say that when we got the house back, he had kept it in really good condition. There's a few minor repairs that need to be done, but nothing too bad. And I think it's made the return in a lot of ways easier. I think even though Canada is my home, had we come back and moved into, say, a new neighborhood or a new house, it would have made that transition of coming home, which some people say can be very challenging. Actually, after you spend time abroad, moving home can be a little bit challenging. There's a bit of a culture thing there. But the fact that we're moving into our old home, we've got our neighbors that we know, although a few sadly have passed on since we were gone. This neighborhood I live in does have a fair-sized seniors community. And so our neighbors to the right of us were replaced by a young couple with a baby on the way. And I haven't met everybody else that's new yet. But generally, we're just kind of fitting back in and just in that unpacking stage, which I don't know if you can see behind me, but I've got a box.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's upright, and it needs to be, I think it's something new we have to build. So yeah, it's a little messy, but the kids started school last week, which was also a big deal. Went to school in person, new schools for both of them. And week one went okay. And hopefully to me, that's the biggest thing right now, that if society is going to be able to properly move on, for many people, it's going to depend on those schools, because the kids being home is crazy. If we're trying to work and have any kind of structure to our day, it's so hard to do when you've got two kids here and trying to keep them on top of the schoolwork and everything. So society has its best chance of returning to normal for many, many people if the kids can get back to school and stay in school. So I'm crossing my fingers that they can sustain this and they don't get, a massive spike in infections that starts sending kids home and lockdowns starting all over again. Just crossing my fingers on that.
Yeah, I hear you. And it's strange because from my perspective as a person who is single and doesn't have any kids, you think like, oh yeah, it must be really bad. I don't want to be in your shoes or in your wife's shoes with kids at home. I've got so many friends who've got kids at home. But hearing you talk like that, I think I'm grasping as to how much it disrupts just the normal daily life. And you say routine, structure. It's just, we all follow our jobs and kids got to go to school. It's just so important. It's not just a matter of oh, we'll stay home for a couple of weeks and enjoy our time together. But it's just, there's so much more behind that. Okay, good.
Yeah, until they went back to school last week, we had been consistently together as a family for literally 6 months. And that's a good thing. But imagine that and I haven't traveled anywhere. The only trip we've taken was even coming home, we were all together as a family on the flight home. But I mean, you know how it was. When I used to travel, I'd be gone sometimes for up to 2 weeks at a time when I would come back to Canada and try to build some family time into those trips. So we would have 3 or 4 times a year where we were spending a couple weeks separated. So yeah, it's for me, when the kids went back to school and they came home and were talking about seeing their friends and doing stuff, that's when I was like, this is what normal sounds like and what we hopefully will be able to continue, I hope. All right, so we're going to catch up a little bit we kind of caught up on what's going on in our lives, but we did bring this topic up in a previous episode, our 2.0 project and our no complaint challenge. And they sort of, I guess 2.0 is the overarching, improvement plan, if you will, around with regard to how we maybe want to show up in the world, newer, improved versions of ourselves. And I think today we wanted to focus a little bit on the no complaint challenge. I wanted to just start out by saying, when we last talked about this, I was pretty on top of the challenge. And just to recap for those that don't know, the no complaint challenge is you put a wristband on. It can be anything as simple as an elastic band to, one of those sort of Lance Armstrong type jobs, or I think your nephew made you one, didn't he?
He did,
yeah. Something that's easy enough to switch from one wrist to the other. And the challenge is to go 21 days without complaining. And in the beginning, you will obviously, as your brain is getting used to trying not to complain so much, the idea is anytime you do complain, you switch the wrist move the band from one wrist to the other. I have to say, in the beginning, I was probably switching it 2 or 3 times a day, and then it got down to like 1, and then I think it was that when we hit that second Airbnb and we had lots of family coming over, it fell off by the wayside. So I have not been really participating in the no complaint challenge for probably over a month now, but I really want to get back into it.
Yeah, and I agree. I was just like you. I was pretty much on top of it when we spoke about it, and then I fell off the wagon. And I want to, I said that then, that I thought I was being quite a dick back then. And I think this no complaint challenge and the vision of a Teresa 2.0 has opened up a portal into anger hell. I'm not sure if I'm just more aware of it, but currently, it's gotten a bit better, but I have been feeling like I'm constantly angry at something, and it's costing me so much energy, and this is not who I'm supposed to be. I realized it before I went to Italy, and it was a good thing, right? Because I thought okay, well, this is not your normal you, but it was also not a normal situation in this pandemic. You're living with your grandparents, you're just not used to that. And so I figured, I think of ways of changing that. And number one step, I'm taking myself out of that. My grandparents are just great. They're the best. But if you have lived away and alone, you've been alone for 15 years, it's just really hard, right? And you're a city person and you're living on it's just not possible. So it's okay, I'll take myself out of sort of that equation. And so I think it's gotten a little bit better since I've been in Italy and just being able to roam around and have activities, etc. But then there's still so much anger, and I get just wound up so quickly, which I really hate. And I think it's bad for who you are and your soul and your brain and perhaps, probably your body, because there's a lot of illnesses that are related to stress and anger. And I think it was so. Number one was getting out of that village. And then number two is me quitting my current job. And so 2 major changes. And I'm hoping that'll do. But I'd be super excited if you and I were to hop on that challenge again. It's funny. I see you taking notes, and it feels like I'm talking to a psychologist right now. You're putting it.
Oh, I just don't want to forget things that I'm thinking of as you're talking. Yes,
it gets put into some sort of like a folder or something.
Right. Yeah, Teresa, before we start, just let me grab your file.
It's like a massive one, like these massive rotating ones.
No, you know what came to mind? The reason why the thing I did write down there is there's a book called Triggers by Marshall Goldsmith. And I've actually listened to the audiobook and enjoyed it quite a bit. In it he describes how it's all about identifying our triggers, the things that set us off, and so I think it's very much related to the no complaint challenge in a sense that with the no complaint challenge, it does cause us to kind of pay attention to the triggers, right? Mm-hmm. So when you actually make a complaint and then physically reach for the thing and move it off from one wrist to the other, it's like a 3 or 4 second moment of consciousness around what it is perhaps that has triggered you. So I don't think we won't go into the book too much now. I need to refresh myself, but it could be one that we might want to explore and maybe do a little report out on in a future episode.
We should, and you and I have spoken about things that trigger us. You have covered a couple of these stories in previous podcasts, I think, but the book and triggers themselves call for an individual episode, I think.
I agree. We can almost dedicate it to that. So what should we do with 2.0 or with the no complaint? I think we should lay out maybe some parameters for the no complaint challenge, just so we can set it up here as we're talking. And then maybe over the next 2 times we record, we can do little report outs on our progress. So what essentially are we agreeing to here? Do we want to say 21 days of the challenge of no complaint, and then take some notes around how that challenge is going, and then we can come back and report out on it in a future episode?
I like that, and to me it's gonna be around complaints. Self-regulate is a very nice word and a very nice thing to do, and be calm and composed, really. Not engaging with the triggers and the things that anger me so much. Yeah, let's do that.
I think this would be great for the listeners as well, if they chose to jump on board with us. And I mean, I'd certainly be interested in hearing anybody else that does this challenge, that they send us some notes or comments or feelings or questions, and be happy to read that and share some of their learnings from it, because I really think this is a worthwhile episode or worthwhile practice. So first of all, let's get this straight though. What qualifies as a complaint in terms of the no complaint challenge?
So a complaint is, what's the word, qualified by?
Well, as an example, okay, so for me, anytime, like if I'm driving and somebody maybe drives in front of me, take into the lane in front of me and doesn't signal, or does it in a kind of an aggressive way, the no complaint challenge would be that I wouldn't complain about it. I wouldn't be like, oh, look at that jerk or that asshole, which is something I probably would say. So that would qualify to me as a complaint. But I've had this conversation with my wife a couple times, who has said, if you bottle all this stuff up, it's not healthy. But I said, no, that's not quite the same. It's not like I'm bottling it up. It's just I'm choosing not to be angered by it, and not to vocalize, in particular, not to vocalize my feelings.
Well, you're internally rectifying itself, right? This is like, it's like your inner child is obviously creating that fuss about that driver in front of you. And then your inner adult is telling you, well, he might be in a hurry because he has to get somewhere real quick. He's late for a job. You know, you can argue yourself into not finding it that agitating anymore. And that is when you're, I think, and I agree with you, when you're not bottling it up, but you're kind of making things right. You're finding yourself a reasonable explanation as to why that is, and that calms you down. Whereas bottling up would be just like you're shutting up about it, but it's still bubbling on the inside, right?
Right. So I'm thinking of, just as you're talking, there are some triggers of my own that cause me to complain. So one would be somebody canceling at the last minute on something.
I love that.
Let's say I'm planning to go out. Someone calls me or sends me a note saying, "Hey man, got to bail. I'm not able to come out tonight after all. Sorry, I'm beat." So that would be, I think, a good example of where you just say, "Okay," and you just accept it and you don't complain about it. You don't say to them, "Oh, how could you do that? You're canceling the last minute." Or to say to my wife, "Yeah, Mike canceled on me. He's no longer coming out." Like, why would he tell me now? Couldn't he have told me this yesterday or Friday? So I think that's a good example of something I know that I would typically complain about.
Yep.
What about noise? Something's noisy outside. Somebody's running one of those like hedge clippers or trimmers, and it's making tons of noise. That's a good example of something where I would probably say, "This guy has been cutting his grass for the last 4 hours. It's 7:30 in the morning. What's going on?"
Yeah, and I get it. I share that with.
Am I making you more agitated just saying all these things?
You are, because I'm thinking about all of the things that get me. The other day I was on the phone to someone. It was a conference call with multiple people, and we had our cameras on, and I'm looking at somebody and they're taking an apple and putting it towards their mouth, and I just dislike the sound of an apple being bitten into. It's like eating, you don't do that, right? You go outside to eat an apple or crisp or something like that. And there's a word for it, misophonia, actually, if you cannot stand the sound of chewing. But leave.
There's a thing for every phobia out there, by the way. There's ones for fear of beards. Panogophobia or something is the fear of beards.
They're quite dirty. There's apparently more bacteria in your beard than there's on a toilet seat.
Oh boy, and here I am growing a beard.
I hear you. I just you know what? I think I have, since we last spoke about this no complaint challenge, I've gotten so bad and I've gotten so enraged about the world and what's going on and the little things. I'm sweating the little stuff. That I don't even have any, because what happens in the no complaint challenge is you're getting enraged, but then in order to not switch the bracelet from one wrist to the other, you're justifying it, right? Am I putting this right? You're saying something like, "Well, you had to cut your trees the other day. You had to mow your lawn the other day. So this is just normal. He's got a garden just like I do." And by that, you're making it void. However, you're telling me about these things, and I'm having a really hard time coming up with these justifications, which makes me think I'm in dire need of this challenge.
Well, where I first heard about this was through Tim Ferris. So he says here, this is Tim Ferris says, "I defined complaining for myself as follows: describing an event or person negatively without indicating next steps to fix the problem." Okay, so that's a little bit of a different take. So he can actually, you can make it known that you have an issue, something negative, but you're also going to fix the problem. I don't know. Do we want to add that? Do we want it to be that way, or do we want to just stifle complaints?
Complaints, I'd say.
Okay. He says here too, "I later added the usual 4-letter words and other common profanity as complaint qualifiers, which forced me to reword, thus forcing awareness and more precise thinking." So He says here, following the above definition, both of the following would require a wrist switch. So saying something like, man, I went into the post office and had to stand behind this rude jerk for 30 minutes. What a waste of time. That would be a qualified.
Complaint, yes.
Or here's another one. Or John can be such an asshole. Totally uncalled for.
Yeah, definite complaint.
Yeah, okay. So just to close the thought around his sort of modification here, and let's just consider it for one sec. He said an example variation of what wouldn't count as a complaint, and this is where we can decide whether we agree with this or not, is back to his post office example. Man, I went into the post office and had to stand behind this rude guy for 30 minutes. It was a waste of time. From now on, I'll go in the mornings before 10 a.m. to avoid the crowd.
And that's good, right? Because that immediately gives you something to, like, you're internally reasoning, and it gives you an outlet, right? Because that is almost like an external person. That's your inner adult telling you, well, next time just go a little bit early. And you're going to avoid all of that stress. Like, I'm just listening to that and I'm immediately feeling calmed down because there is a solution to that. And I think what you have to do with this challenge is you cannot wait for another person, for an outsider to tell you, hey, Clark, next time just go. You got to be that anchor for yourself, right? You got to, we're grown-ups. You got to be that person for yourself to snap out of it. And by that, I don't mean just tell yourself, snap out of it, but give yourself like a logical explanation or solution in that case.
Yeah, it does. It does actually add a little bit of the, like when you go back to the example when my wife said that you're going to bottle all this up, you need to get these things out. This kind of tackles that piece. So it does allow you to vocalize the specific thing, but then you come up with a solution right afterwards. So what do we want to do? We're allowed to vocalize as long as we have that kind of reframe to go right after it?
I'm for that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that has more chance of succeeding.
However, hang on. Doesn't, when I'm by myself, right? I don't have to speak it out loud, but I have to do that reasoning in my head.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to vocalize it out loud. You just, can you imagine sitting on the train? Okay, from now on, I'm going to go to the post office before 10 a.m. every
but
time.
What comes
to
before
avoid
that
the
is the master, like this jerk standing in front of me. But next time, I'll be trouble. Okay, good. Yes.
Okay, so we'll report out on this. Take little notes, at least mental notes, as we go through this and share our experience.
Sounds good.
How queer am I?
Yeah. How queer are we?
How queer are we? Yes. So explain this one. What brought this topic to mind?
Well, I said, like in the intro, I tried to go out and date whilst I was stuck with my grandparents, who are not. I think we spoke about this. They don't know I'm queer, but I went on Tinder. Thought I'd find myself a nice date. And if you're looking for a lesbian date on Tinder, you're going to widen your radius because where I'm from, there's not going to be many queers. So I had to do it like countrywide.
Right. Not widen your options. You're going to widen your radius.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Within 500 kilometers.
Exactly. So I matched with this girl around 3 hours train ride from where I live. And, we had texting, and I can already sense she's a tough nut to crack. She's lesbian, I'm pansexual. And so that's already like a tough nut to crack. Like I'm already like, what's the word? Inferior to her. Like I have to come up to her standards for her to even look at me. Anyhow.
Wait, in your mind or like?
In my mind, probably. But maybe also in her mind. The pan and the bi people are not... We've got a reputation among the proper gays. We're not committing, cannot make up our mind. It's always a risk we're going to run off with somebody else. So far to stereotyping. Now, let me get on to the next stereotype. Her and I get on really well. We go on a first hiking date, and it's quite sweet. We met in the middle between her place and my place. And then 2 weekends later, I go and visit her in her city. And it was nice. It was intense. It was a bit clingy. It was very, like, look at us, we're a couple already. I had to meet all of her friends. It was very exhausting to make an impression. And then I left. Well, number one, how queer am I? Whilst I was there, I constantly wondered, like, am I really queer, or am I perhaps actually just straight? What's wrong with me? Like, there's something already going on there. However, when I'm in a straight relationship or in some sort of a straight thing, I always think I'm gay, or I'm queer at least. Anyhow, I'm leaving, and here's a stereotype around lesbians. It is said that they want to move in after the first date, basically. They're called U-Haul lesbians because they want to move.
I just rented a U-Haul truck yesterday, by the way.
And so I tried dating, but so after this second date, there was an inquisition as to how we can make this seriously work with my traveling lifestyle and her being very busy in the city that she lives, very busy job, a lot of friends. She was barely ever home, really. So I was asked to mend my schedule around her life, which wasn't instantly possible. And I said so. I said, like, well, give me 2 or 3 weeks to, sort out my schedule, and then, we can definitely do this somehow, see each other more often, which wasn't accepted. Like, at that stage, I was asked whether I'm taking this serious, if I really wanted this. I mean, long story short, it just suffocated me after 2 dates. It was so intense. So, yeah, I wonder if I've come across like a proper stereotype of lesbian there. They do want to move in real quick. And what to do with that.
So from a feelings, how did you feel about the idea of, like, was she literally wanting to move in, or that's just the vibe you were getting?
She didn't suggest that. But after 2 dates, there was definitely really clear, the actual text message that I received was, well, I'm asking you to seriously consider how the two of us are going to make this work in our everyday lives.
Wow.
Which is that is quite strong, right?
That sounds like somebody who wants to really get to the point. Maybe they've had they've wasted their time, and either this is their personality, or they are just decided, I'm just going to operate this way to just get to the point really fast.
Could be, and I wonder what caused that. What caused her to think that, right? Was it something flaky about me? Was it around my lifestyle, traveling quite a bit, not having a proper place to live at, that she is like, okay, well, is she really down for anything serious, or is this just for fun? But in doing so, like, that made an escape super easy for me. Like, nobody wants to agree to that, right? Tell me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, let me drop everything and I'll be with you, sweetheart.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that, and I think this is something we've talked about before, is I wonder how many relationships never go anywhere because somebody kind of takes this route of really getting to the chase quickly around logistics and commitment, that had it just been another 2 weeks, a month, 3 months before this sort of stuff came up, would it have allowed the relationship to form and bond a little bit so that it's actually more of a normal conversation for for this type of discussion than it to be happening after, one date.
Yeah. And I think I have been in the situation where I have asked people, where is this leading? What's happening? What are we, right? You want to define something, but typically not after 2 dates. After 2 dates, I think there is something very interesting about keeping it a little bit opaque without being an asshole about it. So I certainly was for that. And then also being asked for to mend my lifestyle around their schedule was a bit too much. And I did not know that the you all lesbian was an actual stereotype. You can find a lot of things on that online, actually. Maybe that was just coincidence, but there is such thing. And
it's nice when you can put a label, though, on something, isn't it?
It was say what? It's easy, you say?
I said it's nice when you go through an experience and then you find a label for it.
You can compartmentalize it immediately and you put it away, right? And that's exactly what I did, which might not have been fair. Maybe she had her reasons in acting so. Maybe she had met other women that were not committing before, and that's why she wanted to tie down things as soon as possible. But there is such a thing around the you all lesbian, where it's obviously not a nice thing to say, and nobody wants to be seen as that person. Apparently, when you have been in the closet for, I don't know, your childhood, your teenager years, even some part of your adulthood, and finally you've come out and you're able to live freely with your sexual orientation, that then you want to have it all. And then I read another article around women producing more oxytocin. God, no. Oxytocin. Well, it's called a cuddle hormone. So when we're cuddling up to another human being, we're producing that hormone, and it makes us feel wanted and loved and comfortable. And it's the cuddle hormone, as they say. So it says everything already. And women are more prone to produce that or produce more of that. So, if two women get together, it immediately forms a stronger bond, I read, which makes it more easy to commit and move in, and, not these dirty games like in heterosexual relationships where you have to, pretend to be shy or not to care. So there's apparently explanations for it.
All right, I want to go back, though, to what you said earlier about that you sometimes feel this, how queer am I, or am I really queer, when you're with, sometimes when you're with a lesbian, but then when you are in a straight relationship, you start to get the, am I really straight? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Did I set that up right?
You set that up correctly, yeah. And I'm as a pansexual person, I'm not alone with that. That you're asking, you're questioning your own sexual orientation a lot, because.
But is it related to the relationship? Like, is it can it come in as almost like an excuse in a way? Because this isn't working out. Maybe I'm not really meant to be in a queer relationship or a straight relationship. Is that kind of what it is? Could be, but do you know what? I've been thinking about a lot about this, and I think it's also what your outside world feeds you, right? I mean, pansexual and bisexual people have been marginalized from the community a lot. It's like, come on, make up your mind. You cannot be somewhere in the middle. You have to be either or. You're not part of this community. Right. You haven't, and I think we spoke about this before.
if I were in a straight relationship, I'd be straight passing, right? All of a sudden, my sexual orientation would be void. People are thinking, oh yeah, she's straight, and that's it, like topic sorted. And that's why a lot of gay people, I think you get a pass, basically. You don't have the struggles that we have. And so I think that's what comes into mind when you're with somebody. When I'm in a lesbian relationship, and it's just not fitting because it's just not a good match, I start to argue, probably you're not even into this. I mean, why are you even doing this, right? This is certainly not right. You should be you just haven't found the right male partner yet. However, if I'm then with a male partner, it's exactly the opposite. And so you're constantly ping-ponging between these two scenarios. And I've never been with another bisexual or pansexual person in a relationship or anything like that to compare these feelings.
So what are you going to do from here? Is the U-Haul lesbian, she's packed up her truck and driven off, or is she still in the picture?
She's driven off, yeah. Took me a while to get her to, drive off, but I had to know that wasn't possible. I don't know. Are
you sad about it?
Shitty thing to say, not for her. I mean, yeah, I feel shitty for blowing her off like that, but for myself a little bit in terms of, you've got to figure this out at some point of time. However, my hopes are up that once I'm in my new place, if I sign that contract and I move to that new city, I'll be out there and I'll download Tinder again. I'll be frequenting the gay bars and the straight bars. Friendships. How many does one need? And is long distance friendships working?
Okay, so friendship. Let's talk about our friendship for a sec. So we met in London, 2018, maybe?
17, perhaps. Late 17, perhaps.
Yeah, so a mutual friend of ours who has listened to a couple episodes of the podcast, which I'm happy to hear. He introduced us. I think I got a text saying, "Oh, you have to go meet Teresa," and maybe he did the same. And then we suddenly found each other in the lunchroom. Either just timing worked out, or some force brought us together there. And as far as time we've spent face to face in our friendship since then, yeah, we've been on a couple of trips together, but generally 90% of our relationship is distance.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Probably 99 if you really factor in like how much physical time we've had face to face versus how much time we interact outside of
our friendship. I mean, face to face consists of, we've met in London, Japan, and Amsterdam. So 4 times in total since we've ever met. We've met in person. But I want to say that you're one of my, closest contacts, and I speak to you daily. I don't speak to you, but I text with you daily. And I want to say that you are, if there's anything to come up in my life, you are amongst the top 3 people for me to text and let them know. Not because I want to get on your nerves, but because I think you're just a great friend, and I know the opinion that comes from you will be fairly neutral. It'll never be bitchy. It'll never be, what's the word? It'll always be like a valid opinion that comes from me. Like I can go to you like for whether it be financial concerns, relationships, or anything like that. So we have managed to, at least that's how I feel about it, to foster a friendship across a massive distance with only very few personal interactions. Yeah,
and I feel the same way about you, by the way. It's it's mutual, and it's very special because I don't think you get these friendships don't come every day. I mean, they're very, very much a part of life that we have to cherish when we can have friendships like this. That kind of brings me to the other thing you wanted to talk about, which was, how many friends do you need? I've thought about this before. As I get older, I still think I have a lot of friends, but I think when you're younger, you sort of have friends like, oh yeah, I've got all these friends. But as you get older, you start to break it down into less people, but more quality over quantity, perhaps, as we get into, our late 30s and me into my late 40s. Mm-hmm. What were you thinking in terms of quantity of friends, or what were you thinking about there?
So I think I've been banging on about this to a lot of people who have accused me of having a lifestyle where I move around a lot, and I'm probably not able to foster a lot of relationships. That mostly comes from people that I know who've stayed in the village, in the little city, and I've never moved away, so I've got a broad circle of friends. So I started looking up these things, and in fact, and a lot of our listeners might know that, mostly you'll have 3 to 5 really close friends that where it's intimate, right? You might interact with them on different levels. Like I've got a very intimate friend of mine who I'll talk to any sort of like emotional well-being, but we wouldn't speak about any properly intimate topic. We've never gone there, but we've known each other for 15 years. And so you have 4 to 5 people who are really in like your inner circle. Those are called intimate friends. Then you have some close friends who you might have over a long span of time. Those are the next circle outside of that. Then casual friends, and then acquaintances. And that's pretty self-explanatory. But like the inner circle is 3 to 5 people. And they may change. And some of the statistics that I come across says these change over very often 7-year spans, because within 7 years, 0 to 7, kindergarten to school, and then 7 to 14, that's childhood. Then you're going into adolescence, then you're going into university. So, 7-year spans is often that these close friendships may last. However, there's very few, but those are the really important ones that last over a lifetime or more than these 7 years. I don't know, 14, 21 years, etc. beyond that. But I think that we are made to feel like a large circle of friends and the amount of people you can invite for your birthday or your wedding is somehow a signal to your, I guess, wealth or your well-being, or how well you're set up. Do you sometimes feel that way?
Yes, absolutely. I've always been told that I have, like, especially by people that I newly become friends with, that once I start introducing them to my friends, I've always had very positive things said about my circle of friends. And I love seeing somebody who becomes, like, who is a friend of mine who I introduced to another friend. I love seeing when they become friends separately on their own, in a sense, that they contact each other as friends. I love that. I just love seeing where it isn't I'm the common denominator in order for the friendship to happen and to keep going. I don't like it when I'm the only reason it continues. Like, oh, I only see so-and-so because of you. Like when you go out and you invite him, and when the three of us hang out, we get along, but that person wouldn't necessarily reach out directly and hang out with that person. So I love when people cultivate friendships afterward. Like Dan, for example, this is a great example where you and I aren't only friends when Dan is around. We are friends when we're separate. We've made our own friendship. We've cultivated. In a way, I probably talk to you more than I talk to Dan now in a lot of ways. So again, I like there's a lot of stuff in here, quantity over quality. But I do look at, I do when I had like my 40th birthday party, we had a lot of friends over and I was happy about it because the people that were there, it is, I guess, a little bit like it's a certain amount of wealth to a certain degree, but I didn't kind of fill the party with people just to fill it up. Like I legitimately these were good friends, and it wasn't like they call it papering the audience when it comes to, give free tickets away to an event just to put people in seats. Yeah. I wasn't doing that at all. These were all people I've known for a very long time, or the ones even that I didn't know that long, they were still people that I considered good friends.
Yeah. Do you ever, in moments where I consider, where are all my friends and where would they, who do I call? Have you ever considered who's going to attend your funeral? We all go through these thoughts, yes. Right? Yeah.
Yes. So quick answer, yes. And this is where I often compare myself to my parents. And I went for a run today, and during that run, I said to my friend who I was running with, I've used my parents a little bit as a what not to do in life. And one of them is the physical exercising and they just don't do it. I don't think they've ever done anything physical since they've turned 40. Like they don't have activities. I mean, maybe walks and things like that. But there's two things I've always wanted to be better at than my parents. One was my health and my physical fitness. The other one is my friendship circle. I'm not just doing it as a way of collecting friends. It's not that. But I do want to have a lot of people show up at my funeral.
You want to, yeah. Well, and ideally before that, you want to have a network, right? If things turn to, people showing up at your funeral, and I guess you have to filter it, right? Because there's probably going to be people who would be, who definitely would have shown up, but there's financial constraints. If you have friends that are in Japan, they cannot just fly over if that were to happen in Canada. But it's the ones you can count on that they would definitely do that beyond any means. So it's about creating that network. And I do remember when one time, this was after my mom had passed away, and I thought my life was turning to absolute shit. I was just at such a rock bottom that I went to speak to a grief counselor. And I sat there and I said, look, I think I didn't think it was the start, but I kind of, in my mind, it was like, this is where it's all turning to shit. Next thing, and I've just had broken up badly with somebody. Next thing, I'll be losing my job. And then I'll be out on the street. No more financial means, nothing. Like in my head, I was out there, and he said, no, wait a minute. That's not how quickly it happens. Let's go through the relationships and the network that you have. Like, number one, how much money have you got in your bank account? How long does it last you? And when that is all gone, you've gone through that. Where can you, and whose door can you knock to ask for, hey, can I stay on your couch for 2 weeks? And that's sort of like making up part of your wealth as well. And as you think about that, yeah, there'll be some people you come across who are like, I'm not sure if they would really do that for me. 2 days, 3 days, perhaps, but for a longer period of time. And as you go through that thought exercise, however, you come across a lot how wealthy you really are. And from my personal standpoint, I think, in my home village or in that region, I don't have many people left because we all left after high school. Everybody is just somewhere else. But we're distributed around this globe. But there would be a support network, people that be like, yeah, I'll help you out with $100. Yeah, you can sleep at my couch for 14 days or two, however long.
I like this as I'm going to say it before I forget, but we talked a while back about the get out of Mexican jail friends, when you've been, arrested in Tijuana or something, and, you somehow are able to contact a friend who gathers a bunch of resources and breaks you out of this jail at 3 a.m. and gets you across the border. I like this other one here. Maybe it's a kind of a measurement. If you scan your group of your friends and go through each and say, yeah, how long would that friend let me sleep on their couch for? I'll go 3 days max, or a month, and just to give yourself a sense of, I don't know, that could be telling you more than just whether they're nice people or close friends. But there's also those friends we have who we stand living on their couch for 14 days or two, or could they stand us living? I think it kind of goes both ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think, but how it's just, it gets really complex in my mind as I think about this, because you have to measure them by different standards, right? If there's a person who's got just like a bed sit and they're saying, hey buddy, 1 week, and I've got, I'm a young doctor, I've got night shifts and everything. If they say 3 days, that's a lot already, or a week, that's a lot already. Whereas if I come to you and you've got your beautiful house in Canada and you're like, Teresa, 1 week is enough. I'm like, you're a dick, Clark. Come on, I've got a shed in the garden. Let me sleep there.
There you go. Yes.
But an interesting topic, by the way, calling out of jail. Yeah, I have, I come from a family that doesn't speak English, they're not quite international. And I always wondered if something were to, like if I were to be kidnapped and I've got just one call, who would I call, right? Because, or like an accident, or somebody needed to communicate in another language other than German. Funnily enough, there's a person from our previous workplace that I have on mind. I was like, this is the person that's most connected, most well-spoken, smartest, who I'd be. It doesn't matter how long I've been away from this job. I would call as the first instance, and I would ask them to call these and these agents or foreign offices, call my family, and then one call to set it all off. And that's my joker sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, lots there. I think we could, I hope listeners are actually maybe running through their friends as we're talking here and thinking, oh yeah, who would I be able to depend on to break me out of a jail somewhere? And I think you could almost tee it up, because you could say, interestingly, how you mentioned the language part. Let's assume that if you take that whoever it is you call is able to speak any language that would need to be spoken. If you remove the element of, okay, well, yeah, they only speak German, so they're only going to be so helpful. Let's say they could speak multiple languages. Would they then rise to the top of the list in terms of someone that would be one of the, I think it's more about the dedication and the, no questions asked, perhaps, approach, that if you scan through your list of friends, who's the one that's going to not ask a lot of questions? You can just call them and say, here's the situation. Who is that friend? Who is the man or the woman that is could be on your speed dial to step in? I'm just throwing it out as a rhetorical question right now, but I ask everyone to think about that for a sec. Is it a family member? Is it your spouse? Is it your best friend from that you've had since your whole life? Who is that person?
Mm-hmm. But they have to go together. It's qualitative and quantitative in that way, right? If you have somebody who would do anything for you but doesn't speak the language, well, I guess you can count on them going to the next. It's like, leave it with me. I'll find somebody who can deal with the language barrier of this, right? Yeah. So maybe the qualitative piece is better than what I would call the quantitative bit. Yeah, but it kind of goes to like, who does that for you and who's got the capabilities, and you've just got one call. But after that, it can obviously spread. Very interesting. Maybe we'll do a follow-up call on that, evaluating our friendships.
Sounds
You'd
good.
be definitely a person I'd call.
Yeah, and I think you're someone that I could call in terms of that no questions asked sort of, okay, I've got a situation. I don't think there's going to be tons of judgment being heaped on. That's the thing that it makes those types of calls so tough, is just, it's kind of like what our parents, at least what the parents the best thing a parent could say was, look, if you've been drinking and you need me to come pick you up, A, I don't want you driving anywhere. B, I don't want you to go with someone who's also been drinking. That no questions asked phone call that has no, how could you do this? It can come at any time of night. I will be there to pick you up. I think that's the best thing that a parent can say to their kid. And then you can deal with the rest of it later.
Exactly. Good point. Yeah, I like that.
Do you have a product that you wanted to share today to plug?
God, I thought about one earlier on and then escaped me. No, I have not prepared a product. Do you have a product?
Yeah, I'll share a product. It's a book I've been reading. It's called Atomic Habits by a guy named James Clear. James Clear, he's a huge student of habit forming. A lot of what he says is based on some of the teachings by a guy named Charles Duhigg, who wrote a book, I think it's called The Power of Habit, I believe. And I won't get into a lot of detail, but I'm only just starting the book. I haven't finished it. I've only read a couple chapters. But I really like how he talks about how and why we form both good and bad habits. And he's got a kind of, there's like the cue, there's a reward, there's all these elements to why we get ourselves into forming these good and bad habits. And it could be another thing we could talk about in a little bit more detail, but just for the listeners, the book, if you're looking at what's involved in habits and forming of good and bad habits, James Clear's Atomic Habits is excellent so far. Okay, so next time we talk, you'll be back in Germany.
That's right.
I assume.
Hopefully some more things to report on.
Okay, looking forward to it.
Same here.
See you soon.